I don't think that Trump has fundamentally changed his view of NATO and the EU. He really basically thinks that that NATO is useless and that the EU is dangerous, particularly in terms of trade relations for the United States, that the United States gets bad deals from the EU. But I think he has moderated his approach to dealing with that view, and that he has, in part because of the influence of his cabinet appointments, and in part because of just the other priorities he has in governance, not really focused very much on those issues. And particularly with NATO, he feels like he's in a pretty good place. So I don't think that, particularly in the next year or so, that he will majorly affect transatlantic relations. But we should recognize that he is a fundamentally different kind of president, has a fundamentally different view of transatlantic relations. And if he ever gets around to it, if he ever seizes sufficient control of his own government, or he ever just turns his attention to Europe, these views will manifest themselves. I think that Europeans should understand who Trump is and what it really means that he's president. On a certain level, he's part of a pre-existing trend of the United States retrenching a bit from Europe, of trying to take less responsibility for European security affairs. And that's not about abandoning Europe, but it is about reducing American commitment and responsibility. Trump is a very extreme version of that, and I think Europeans should be preparing for the possibility that he will implement that extreme version. We've seen hints of that in his approach to the Iran deal, in his approach to climate change, in his approach to recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And what I think broadly we see from Europeans is a belief that this isn't happening, that Trump will be contained, and that the broader trend of American retrenchment from Europe just isn't going on. They're just denying the trend altogether, and I think that that's a real mistake. Of course, you can still work with the United States. Of course, Europeans must work with the United States, but they must be preparing to be more independent and more self-sufficient in security. I think that Trump's Russia policy, to a large degree, has been hampered by the fact that that he's under a lot of spotlight for his relationship with Russia in domestic politics in the United States. Then Russia has become a policy which he doesn't frankly want to touch, which he doesn't want to get involved in. But that shouldn't obscure the fact that he has a very distinct view of Russia than either the rest of the American political spectrum or most of Europe. And he would very much like to have a much more constructive, much closer relationship with Russia. To this day, he has never said a bad word about Vladimir Putin. And I think that that means that that his policy has certainly been hampered by the Russia probe, but if the Russia probe ever goes away, which one assumes it eventually will, but maybe it won't, then we might see a big change in U.S. policy toward Russia.